Welcome back to our Aspire Advantage series. Today I have Jim Dickinson here with me. We're really excited about this conversation. I'm Christy Anders. I'm the Program Operations Director for Aspire, which is Loyola University Maryland's Center for Continuing Education. So we have this series that we've been talking about skills and different industries and just trying to kind of see if there's any patterns and trends between what's happening with skills in our world, but also trying to really zero in on some different industries and just bring in some different perspectives. So Jim, thank you so much for being here with me today. I'd love if you could introduce yourself and just give us a little bit about your job and your role and where you're from.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Christy. Thanks for having me and looking forward to this conversation. Jim Dickinson, I am I'm the Chief Talent Officer at SC&H. We are a national consulting and financial services firm. We're headquartered just north of Towson, Hunt Valley area near Baltimore. And we have offices in Columbia, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. in Tyson's Corner, newly opened office in Chicago. And folks really all across the country working remotely on our team, about 400 people strong across 13 different service lines that span all kinds of financial services, technology-related services, et cetera. I am a proud Loyola University Maryland alum. It's scary to say as the years pass by, but class of 2001. Gosh, almost a quarter century. I know my wife and I graduated together, and we just realized it's our 25-year college reunion
Whew.
next year, and I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, that's
But
impressive though. That's impressive.
I guess impressive is one word for it. But yeah, quarter century out. At Loyola, I studied psychology. After school, went right on to a master's and PhD at Clemson University in industrial organizational psychology. So I've really been working in the world of developing leaders, teamwork, assessing and incentivizing performance in various kinds of organizations through the course of my career.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that. That's so helpful to kind of position our conversation today. So can you tell me what are some things that you love about your industry and the work that you do?
Yeah, I've been in this industry of professional services now for going on 4 years, and one of the things that I think really stands out that really anybody who finds success in this industry will understand is that it's such a relationship focused business. You know, at the end of the day, we provide a lot of services that a lot of other people across the country provide. And I think what really differentiates you over time is your ability to build really strong, trusting relationships with your clients, with your teammates that you work with on a day-to-day basis. And when I say trusting relationships, I think it's about making sure that the relationship evolves to be about much more than just the project that you're working on. And it really starts with just taking the time to get to know each other as people, and then also taking the time to get to know the context about whatever this project is. So if I'm working on an audit for a client, if I'm working on implementing a new piece of software with a client, understanding the broader purpose behind that. Why is it important to them? Where are they looking to take their business? What's meaningful to them about the work, et cetera. All those kinds of things. That's the heart of our business, of our industry. And I'm a people person. And
Hmm.
my career background is about all things people and how we work together to be successful. So
Hmm.
being in an industry where that's really I think the number one differentiator is really exciting.
Yeah. That's really interesting because and forgive me if this is it's not intended to be offensive, but I think sometimes people think of things like accounting or finance as dry or as there's not a lot of life in there because it's all the numbers or it's all the data. But I love that there's so much like there's always people within those projects and there's always people's true lives that are impacted by those projects. And so I love that that's the thing that you love about it, is that
Yeah.
there's life behind all of that. So again, that's not intended to be offensive at all, but I think sometimes that's a perception that people have, and so I
Well, it's
appreciate that.
it's actually it's great. I'll touch on that a little more directly too, in that, one of the things we did in the past couple of years, we were going through this rebranding process as a firm. And part of that, there's a logo that you're updating, refreshing, you're changing colors. Um, but we also looked at it as an opportunity to make sure we were describing ourselves out in the market as both, the reality of what our client's experience was of us, and also our aspirations for where we're going as a firm. And long story short, we ended up, through a lot of these focus groups and interviews with previous clients, current clients, we heard these four key themes that really we've adopted now as like these are the four pillars of who we are.
Mm,
Two of them were kind of table stakes for the industry, and they kind of get back to the dry part. It's our clients see us as expertly qualified, right?
yeah,
We know what we're doing. We're always learning, adding value with our expertise. And then we're results oriented because we are providing significant, powerful results through the work we do. Those are kind of table stakes in this industry, right?
yeah,
That's you get the work done. It's high quality work.
yep.
Great. The two things though, so those were two of the pillars. The other two were that we're really people focused. And so we really develop these trusted relationships. Our folks are known for getting involved in the community, and we like to
Mm,
share the stories of how we're involved in the community. And we're exceptionally responsive. That was the fourth pillar, right? And it was about,
interesting.
hey, when somebody asks for something, we get back right away. Sometimes we even get the answer to somebody right before they asked, and they think, "Wow, we were about to ask for that, and we didn't even have to."
Yep.
And those two things, I think, get down to the commitment to people, the commitment to relationships, good communication, exceptional communication, right? And so those were things that our clients actually said, we think that you guys, not only do you do this, but you do it in a better way than
Hmm.
other folks we've worked with. And so that's really where we said, all right, the table stakes are the expertise and the results. The differentiator for us is the people
Mm.
focus and that exceptional responsiveness.
Yeah, I love that. I love the whole process of that too, and that you identified both both those pieces of we have to be able to do our jobs well, like just the functionality part of it, but we also have to be able to connect with people well,
Yeah.
and how you also identified, those table stakes, and then like what's our differentiator. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure that that process was as far as like how you're describing it, it was handled very well too, bringing in the feedback and getting input. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
What are some key challenges or disruptions that professionals in your industry are experiencing right now?
Yeah. Challenges and or disruptions, right? Because they all, I think, most challenges and most disruptions also have opportunity to them. Some of them are just like, hey, all right, there's a challenge here. I think, first of all, while we do a lot of things besides traditional like public accounting work at our firm, but our roots are very much in public accounting. It's still a big part of what we do. And even with some of our other service lines, having that public accounting background, having the CPA credential is a huge benefit. Well, in our industry, we have seen a downward trend in the number of students majoring in accounting, the number of people then pursuing a CPA license. A lot of different reasons for that, a lot of different efforts also to help change that curve and that trajectory. But that's a reality for all firms, large, small, that shrinking pool of talent, which also means we then are behind on developing the next generation of leaders to
Mm-hmm.
go out and really lead the relationships with clients. So everybody, I think, in our industry would say, hey, that's a challenge that we're all trying to address in our own ways. I think another thing that I would say is both a challenge and a disruption, but also really exciting, is just the way technology is emerging. The way, as we start to look at things like generative AI, um, And I really think you have to start understanding, and I'm not an expert on this, but there is a difference between just when you just say, yeah, AI is coming, right? There's generative AI, right? That you can build content with. There's robotic process automation where you can just automate things behind the scenes that are just kind of going, and you don't have to manually do as much effort. So that's all. The reality is all these technologies are coming out. Um, I think you have to approach them with this balance of, okay, what's ready for us to use? But what can we use responsibly in a way that is not going to damage the quality of our work, not
Mm,
gonna impact things in a negative way. So you've got to kind of you got to keep moving quickly and being kind of entrepreneurial with all these new technologies, but also being responsible and
hmm
disciplined about, okay, how do we roll this out? For instance, we were very, very clear early on with our folks as GPT started coming out, where our IT team and our just centralized through the firm, we made it really clear, like, you got to make sure these are open access databases, right? You cannot put sensitive information into that.
Yeah.
Client information, financial information. Um, so there's again, you have to be willing to engage with these new technologies, but also really conscious of
hmm
what's the right way to do it. So I think again, that's one of those shifts where a lot of disruption, and we almost have to disrupt ourselves and say, hey, let's think of new ways to do things. But it's also something we have to take some caution with. So I think
Yeah.
that, on the talent side, just some of the changing demographics in a lot of the majors and areas of expertise that we want to bring on board to serve our clients, and just the rapidly evolving technology are two of the biggest things
hmm
that I think about a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So as a leader then, how do you handle some of these challenges and opportunities?
Yeah, it's look, we are a firm that has uh a pretty bold ambition to grow. We talk about this with our team a lot. Um, here's the way that I have tried to couch that message is that, growth is kind of like what we're here to do. It's what our charge is. We are a private business. We're here to grow because really, I think any business, either it grows or it shrinks, right? Year after year. And so I'd much rather be on the growth side. I think it's exciting. I think it also, ultimately growth is what drives opportunity for the next generation. It's what allows people to grow their careers, to be rewarded more and more as their careers go on. So uh, our message to our people is really about this idea that growth is what we're here to do. But the way that we're going to achieve that growth is by being really committed to a people first approach. And that all gets back to it's the relationships with our clients, but
Yep.
just as important, it's relationships with each other. It's holding each other accountable, it's encouraging each other, and really growing and winning together.
hmm
Yeah, I think in one of the unique ways that we position that as we are really an early pioneer in something called ESOP structure, or an employee stock ownership program. So
Mm.
uh, in this industry, there are very few firms that have gone to an employee ownership structure from the traditional partnership that a lot of firms are based on. Even more so, really, really small amount that are 100% employee owned, where
Mm.
our so ultimately that means, like, we really look around, and we are a lot like owners, like we're co-owners at
Mm.
our firm, who are all invested in success together and growing together. So that's one of the big ways that we look at, okay, um, in terms of the talent out there, we want to attract people who want to be a part of that platform where they're
Yeah.
invested in growth. Um, that it's exciting to them and where they're going to reap the rewards of that. And it's also this a culture then where everybody can look at themselves as an entrepreneur, right? And so I can add some unique value, think about some new ways either to utilize technology or new ways to serve our clients in a way that's going to help us grow. So
Hmm.
that's that environment that we're trying to cultivate, that I think addresses both of those key challenges.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I love the, again, you coming back to the people centeredness. And do you find as you're looking for talent then, how do you, when you say you want people that are willing to invest in that growth, what does that practically look like? Has someone who maybe makes some hiring decisions, or like as you're doing that evaluation, because you can't see that in a certification. You can't see that, just someone presents you a CPA license. And so how, what are some markers, or like practically how do you, what do you look for in order to see this person is going to fit well in this culture, or this person has the same level of motivation or core values that would make sense? Does that?
Yeah, that's great. As I talked about those four pillars before, that's something that we try to uh, really talk about in our selection process. So our talent acquisition team does a great job of just upfront talking with any candidate about, hey, here's who we are, here's how we're different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like we try to be really transparent about that and ask candidates also to be transparent about what are you looking for? What do you want to be a part of? Um, we also just very early on in everybody's career at our firm, we try to instill some really key ways to be successful. Part of that is the four pillars, right? But in addition, like every single person across our firm, we are very clear about, hey, technical performance is really key. It's important. Um, Growing the firm and thinking about how am I contributing to that, important. And then what we call culture contribution, right? Because I think you can say, yeah, I'm looking for somebody to fit in our culture. That also means, well, I'm just looking for everything to stay the same, right? We're not looking at
Mm.
continuous improvement. I want to see, are you here to contribute to our culture? Whether it's by supporting the great things that are here today or by adding something new, right? Um, and then, that whole area of growing the firm, like here's a really great example. You might be somebody fresh out of college who's starting a job here. And I don't want you to just think growing the firm means that I'm going to start bringing in new clients and new revenue on day one. For somebody that early in their career, think about just being able to share the story about who we are with some of their friends who also recently graduated, referring new talent into the firm, being an ambassador in that way on the recruiting front. There are all different ways that we can help support the growth.
Hmm.
And so I think just commitment to technical expertise and becoming better at your line of work, any way that you can help us grow, and then contributing to this really special culture that we've built and want to continuously improve. That's really the way that we're trying to evaluate candidates. We're also trying to just get people in the door who are excited about that. And I think you
Hmm.
can tell that through initial conversations, and then you can cultivate it as people come on board and really start to become part of the firm.
Hmm. Awesome. Thanks for that. In your view, which skills are becoming essential to stay competitive and adapt to these changes that we've talked about? And what's a good way for individuals to get those skills?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've talked a lot about relationships so far, and I think I would actually keep coming back to one of the biggest skills is being a really effective communicator. It's and when I say communication, it is writing really effective emails, right? That are to the point, that are appropriate. It's an appropriate type of writing for an email, which isn't just about one line sometimes, right? Sometimes you do have to communicate some um, challenging information via an email. So there's a way to do that, right? That's better than others. Being able to present well, being able to just when you even think about your body language in a meeting with people, all of these kinds of things, like the art and the science of being a great communicator, is what I would put at the top of my list. I think that one of the biggest ways people can get access to that kind of skill is it's a bit of osmosis, right? It's a bit about being there, getting your reps of observing people who've been in that seat for a while, observing people who are in seats that you aspire to be. Um, and I do also talk a lot with our young professionals about this idea that we have a pretty flexible kind of hybrid approach to in-office work. I actually really much prefer the term in-person work because I really don't care where it is. If you're at a client site, if you're in a cubicle, if you are out at lunch with somebody that you're growing a relationship with, like being in person, not necessarily 5 days a week, but it's critical for all of us. Like we're human
Yeah.
beings. And for us, we are in a relationship-oriented business. Like that's such a critical piece. And then the other piece is there's opportunity that can come from being in person, and that even will relate back to how do you grow your technical skills? Because hey, formal education, super important. And then you build on that formal education with practical experience. Well, here's a good example of, let's say I am an early career professional and I have this choice of, I could do a lot of my work from home and do it on my computer, or I can do it in the office. I might come into the office 5 days in a row next week and have a few meetings, do a bunch of work at my desk. Nothing big is going to happen, right? Other than that, it's going to be relatively routine, relatively what I expected. Maybe that'll even happen the next week and the next week and the next week. But I guarantee you at some point, there's going to be a leader that has a pretty urgent need, an issue, something that they want to pull somebody into to help them and support them. And they are not going to go on to Microsoft Teams or Slack and type in, hey, who's around to help me with this urgent issue? They're going to poke their head out the door and to see who's around and try to get somebody engaged. And then who knows what you're going to learn, right?
Right.
You're going to learn by shadowing them, learning like what's their perspective on this urgent need. You're going to probably learn some new technical thing that you didn't know about before. And so I think, it's the continuing to get your in-person experience, both from the perspective of building your ability to communicate back and forth and being there for when the pitch comes that you want to get that at bat. And it's a little unpredictable when that'll happen.
Yeah. And even when you said some of those things, you can just get through having those reps or that osmosis. If you're not there, you just by default have less of those interactions to learn from. Because even if somebody else is walking past and you overhear a part of a conversation, or you're interacting with people during a lunchtime, you're picking things up about what that professional communication should and could look like. And you wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. As a completely remote worker myself, I know that there's those times that I miss those opportunities. I'm way more functionally efficient, but as far as that ability to make those connections, I know that that's just not something that's feasible to me like it is, to other people.
I love that phrase too, that functionally efficient. Absolutely. And like, that's important.
Right.
But yeah, there are trade-offs that you've got to figure out the right formula, I think, for the type of work you do, and the stage of your career that you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. So are there some skills that are becoming harder to find and or just retain in your industry?
Yeah, I think the way I approach that question is it's probably less about how you phrased it in terms of skills that are harder to find um, or retain. It's probably more about the landscape is shifting a lot. And so not resting on your laurels and saying, well, hey, I've got this skill and now it is what it is and I can move on from there. Like here, I guess one practical way I look at that is and I think a lot of folks have caught up to this, but it'll probably resonate with some people um, listening to this conversation. If you look back at, I think using, say, Microsoft Excel, just as a technical example, like a lot of ways that you could become really efficient analyzing data, using formulas and pivot tables and all these kinds of things. And that's still like pretty effective today. But what's even more effective is when you build some kind of automated data flow and visualization in like Microsoft Power BI, right? So both tools from the same provider. And there are a lot of tools from other providers out there that can do a lot of similar things. But I think the point is um, you can get to that level of mastery in a portion of your job. But I think more and more these days, every couple of years, and maybe that's a little bit too quick, but I think in some cases not, like there's going to be something new out there. So the skill, I think, of being a lifelong learner and always thinking out, all right, what's next? What's out there? How do I get better?
Hmm.
Like another great example I've heard, this is not my own phrase, but I've love it and I've heard it in many different contexts. And it was generally, there was the phrase that initially came out a couple of years ago was like AI is going to take your job. And then the response to that was no, AI is not going to take your job. Somebody who knows how to use AI is going to take your job.
Yep.
And I think that's also it's just another illustration of that point that
Hmm.
um, you got to keep a pulse on where those changes are and the things that you do need to upskill
Hmm.
into, and then move pretty quickly to build those skills.
Yeah. So do you find that there's a lot of people who have that drive for lifelong learning, or is lifelong learning itself a skill or a commitment maybe, or a perspective or a mindset that you find a lot of? Because I think that that in and of itself, could be identified as if you want to succeed or if you want to have fulfillment in your career, you
Yeah.
need to be a lifelong learner. You need to be committed to that process. Do you find that there are a lot of people who have that level of commitment, or do you find that there's a lot of people that are content with the knowledge that they have and they want that knowledge to help them continue on without having to put in the work?
I bet there's a lot of different categories. And I think, look, I think we're kind of wired to be curious in one way or another. So, you know, I'm sure, yes, there are some people who are super content. Um, Here's the other thing that I think is probably actually the added layer to lifelong learning is can you prioritize what you're learning? Because look, when you think about the amount of information now that each of us consumes on a daily basis, with our phones, with computers, just social media, all these different ways. I bet there's a lot of folks who want to be lifelong learners, um, but aren't being maybe as strategic about how do I filter the
Hmm.
stuff that I really should be prioritizing learning versus other stuff that's just kind of coming my way randomly.
Hmm.
Um, and it's funny, like I think I'd also go back to one of the best ways to do that is find other people who have been successful in what you're trying to do and learn from them. Like, what are your sources of learning?
Hmm.
What are you paying attention to out there? And again, that you can do that in in-person conversations. You can do that on Zoom. You can do that just by engaging on LinkedIn. Um, But I think being really intentional about, right, what exactly is worth learning at
Hmm.
this point in time, because I can't learn everything all at once.
Right.
So the prioritization,
Hmm.
I think,
Yeah.
is a really important nuance.
Yeah, it sounds like in some of the things that you're saying, um, that a key skill today is just discernment
Mm,
and
yeah.
being able to have that prioritization and say, this is actually important. But also when you were, talking about the technology aspects and that, what what should we be feeding into these open models? What should we make sure is, how do we mitigate our risks here? I think there's a large part of, now that we have so much at our fingertips and now that there's so many possibilities, discernment is more and more important as a skill itself as we are developing as professionals.
Yeah.
Um, and and so I think, but I think there's levels of discernment and there's different ways that that is shown. But that's something that I feel like I'm picking up that there's different, like that's a theme in some of your responses.
Yeah,
Um,
I like how you phrase it too, because I think a lot of times when I think about discernment, I think about that as helping me in a lot of ways clarify the path that I should be on. But I think the other level then is to think about, okay, here's the path that I've discerned, but now it's like, what exact tools do I need? Because there's a million tools at my disposal. There's a million
yep.
different things I could do to go down this path. What's the most effective way? And that's a whole nother level
Yeah.
of discernment that I probably don't even think about as much as I should.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we're talking about these skills, are there any skills that were previously critical, but maybe are less relevant or less important in today's landscape?
Hmm. Um, I do think, part of one of the things that we talk about in our culture is not always, it's not always about working harder. Sometimes it is about working smarter. Here's how I would actually break that down practically. Um, I think if you go back, um, even to the start of my career, I think there was a common conception that, hey, one of the number one traits you could have is just this ability to be gritty, ability to roll your sleeves up, put in a little bit of the extra effort to get something done. And like, let me be really clear, that is still an absolute, like, fundamental way to get ahead and to be successful. The caveat, though, is that sometimes now, and I think more and more so in today's modern world, um, grit isn't actually the most efficient way to get where you want to go. So being able to pick the moments where, yeah, it is just about rolling up my sleeves and getting this thing done, um, great, and then going out there. But just relying on that, I don't think is as valuable now as it is to also say, hey, what's out there that I could be saving 20% of the time to do this. I need to go attack this a little bit more smartly than just by brute force.
Hmm.
So I don't know if I'd say that's more of a skill. It's probably more of just a trait that absolutely is still vital, but it's not going to get you through every challenge in the smartest way, like maybe it would have a couple decades ago.
Hmm. Yeah, almost like there was a work hard was the general advice. And then
Yeah.
we transitioned into the, work smarter, not harder. And now it's almost back to that discernment of, now you have to know when to work hard and when to work smart. And
Yeah, that's a
so
good point. Right, right.
you have to kind of figure out, you have to have the traits of both of those. I have to be able to both work hard and smart. Then I also have to know when to apply those
Yeah.
and how to go about that.
And
Um,
and like what parts of your day does it make more sense to do either? It's funny, like totally non-work related. Like I love fitness, I love working out, and one of the things that was always hard for me was like I'd come up with a routine, and like I'm kind of a data geek, so I'm trying to track numbers and everything. And then I'd get, through like maybe 4 or 6 weeks of that workout routine, and I'd say, all right, now I got to switch all the exercises up, but I still want to keep my workout balanced. Take a lot of time. And then, sometimes it would go into like 8 or 10 weeks and I'm plateauing and I'm just not getting progress. And I just realized, like, in the last year or so, there are these tools out there, like fitness specific tools where you put in your goals and it's really taking the place of a personal trainer,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it's saying, hey, work on these 6 exercises today
Yep.
at this weight, track your progress, tell us how it felt, and then tomorrow it's going to give me a whole new set of workouts. And so all of a sudden, like, now I can focus more of the hard work
Mm-hmm.
on the actual fitness, and I'm not thinking at all about what the routine is. I'm letting the machine do that, and then I
Yeah.
just go and execute on it.
Yeah. And so you get more time actually doing the task that leads to your goals versus having to do the planning in order to do the task that leads to the achievement of your goal.
Yes,
And
well
so,
said. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so if people are looking to enter this field, or your industry, if people want to go into financial services, I know you said you also have a lot of different branches. You have some different technology, services. How can they prepare themselves, to meet, present demands, but also thinking about the future? How would you suggest people go about doing that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a pretty broad umbrella when we talk about like professional services, financial services, consulting. There's hundreds of different career paths, and we don't have them all at SC&H. Just like any firm has a lot of its own specialty areas. So I think just really getting out there to explore in the world, to talk to different people in industries, and realize too, and I'll talk to a lot of students, like undergraduate students who, um, I think they feel like they need to know exactly like what consulting is, right? And like
Mm,
the reality is, when I came to SC&H a few years ago, there are aspects of consulting that we do that I never knew existed in the world, right? So it's really just getting to know, okay, and being comfortable asking, like, tell me what does this mean? Like, you're a consultant in this area. What do you do, and what kind of skills does it take? Learning from people who've been there already, I think, is a real big key. I think the other piece is get practical experience. Again, I'm talking back to like really early career and internship type of experiences. But I think they're so important for anybody who's considering a career path. And like my personal story is, I was pretty pretty darn sure I was going to become a clinical psychologist as an undergrad. And then through my first internship experience in that setting, I realized it wasn't the right fit for me. And the long story short, through a bunch of mentorship and through a bunch of research, I found industrial organizational psychology as this alternative path that just made a lot of sense for me. But I would have never found that path if I hadn't had confirmed another path wasn't the right one through some
mm-hmm,
practical experience. So I think giving ourselves permission to try things,
mm-hmm,
and then also recognize that trying something and realizing that it's not for you is just as powerful of information.
mm-hmm,
That now you're gonna be able to use that education to discern the next step,
mm-hmm.
and find a path that's really fulfilling for you.
Yeah. No, I love that, finding something that doesn't work is just as powerful. Maybe not just as, it'd be great if you could land in the right place the first time, but many
Yes.
of us don't do that. And, even if you look at the data on how many times people switch careers or, you know, um, I'm not going to throw out a number because I'll probably be wrong, but there's a high number of people that are in a career field that's completely unrelated to their degree that they got in
Yeah.
college.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think there's also a lot of pressure for young professionals in particular to get it right the first time and to start and that definition of success and what that looks like and how much am I supposed to be making and what kind of title am I supposed to have, doesn't allow for that trial and error or that I'm learning about myself and learning what I don't want. And that's very valuable, as much as landing somewhere immediately that could look very successful, especially because I think there's so many people in some of our younger generations that, and this goes a little bit back to your, like working hard thought, that they want more meaning out of their job than maybe has been wanted by previous generations. And I think that search for purpose and meaning is, I think it's just different. And they're less content just working really hard at something and doing the same thing for many years if it doesn't feel meaningful. And so, yeah, I mean, that's putting a couple of different things together there, but,
And Christy, I think it's really important to stop comparing ourselves to everybody else around us,
yep.
because, we get to see all these examples of folks where, on the surface and the pictures they post online, it looks like they just landed their dream job, and gosh, they graduated at the same time as me, and how did they do that? Comparing ourselves to other people is we've got such a limited set of data on what's going on in other people's lives. I really think it's about that internal, let me compare who am I today and how have I grown compared to where I was this time last year.
Yeah.
And now what do I need to do in the year ahead? And that's, just focusing on your own journey and improvement is going to serve you a lot better than the external comparisons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So we have one more question. And of course, as from a center from continuing education, I can't leave without asking, how does continuing education play a role in maintaining either a competitive edge in your industry or maintaining that sense of fulfillment in different roles, or that growth that you talked about? How do you see continuing education for your industry?
Well, look, as long as you assume that nothing's going to change from here on out in your industry at all, like, continuing education is not important. Now, if you think change is ahead on any level, change is going to require you to learn something new, right? And I think we've touched on in this conversation all the different kind of technical things that are happening in our world that we have the opportunity to take advantage of and make our work better. And when I say make our work better, I even mean the quality of life for us and our results that we deliver for the people who are our stakeholders in our work. So there's all different ways to look at that. I would also say, as anybody goes through their career path, and I think it's important. I think it's a responsibility of companies to articulate the journey from individual contributor to being a supervisor to being maybe a head of a department. Because look, that's a very common path for people to come up through their career. And I don't think we emphasize enough how different the skills are.
Yeah.
I was talking with a student actually earlier this week, just about career paths and about how people can kind of get derailed in their careers when they don't pick up the right kinds of skills, which are oftentimes interpersonal. And they were talking about like a manager at this restaurant where they worked, and it was just such a nightmare experience. And like I said, what's wild too about that is I bet that manager was an excellent waiter or waitress or an excellent, server, greeter at the front of the house. And that's why they got that promotion to being the manager. But what they didn't get, and either it wasn't given to them through guidance or they didn't seek it out on their own, it's probably a little bit of, it could happen either way, was you're going to have to learn some new skills now in order to be successful in this new role. So again, I mean, I guess if you assume nothing's going to change about your industry or the technology in it, and if you assume that you're just going to do the same job now for the next 20, 30, 40 years, then continuing education is not important at all. But other than that, it's going to be really important.
Yeah. Yes. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate your perspective and our conversation. look forward to having some more conversations maybe in the future about how things are changing. And yeah, we're grateful for you. Thank you.
I'd love to do that. Yeah, thanks, Christy. I really enjoyed the conversation today.
Thank you.